joining us on the Unspoken podcast. He writes for NBA.com. He's also on NBA TV, and he's also on the Hang Time podcast. Sekou Smith is joining us now. Thanks for joining us, Sekou.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me.
So the NBA trade deadline just passed. A lot of news to talk about. What was the most surprising move to you that happened during the trade deadline?
Most surprising? Honestly, there wasn't a shocker this year. And normally we have something that comes out of nowhere, maybe out of the blue thing that occurred, and it didn't happen on the deadline day, but really came up in the lead up was Kristaps Porzingis, requesting and then being delivered, requesting a trade and then getting dealt to Dallas. That was maybe the most unforeseen thing I saw happen. I knew there was rumblings about him not being, particularly enthused about what was going on in New York. I had no idea it was to the point where he was ready to get out of town. So that might have been the one thing that kind of came out of nowhere. But there wasn't a shocker. We didn't have something that hit us, at the last minute or, when all of our jaws are on the floor that this guy got moved or this guy was even available. So much of what went down was kind of telegraphed. Names we'd heard about, Marc Gasol getting moved, was expected. There was something that was going to happen with Memphis. It was either him or Conley. We all knew that was going to be the case. To me, what was more surprising was some of the destinations, some of the deals that actually got done. I thought, the Chicago Wizards deal where you're moving Otto Porter, who had been rumored to get moved, but for that to be the deal, for Jabari Parker to be in that deal was just, sometimes you look at the deals that go down and you're scratching your head asking why are they doing this or what's the point of this? That one was one of the stranger ones, that Chicago would add Otto Porter to that locker room when he's not really the kind of sage old veteran you need to come in and help nurture a young locker room along. So, if anything left me scratching my head, that would be the one deal that I'm still trying to kind of sort through in my head as to what the end game is.
So before we get into the Knicks deal, let's talk about all the drama that went down with Anthony Davis and the Pelicans. Do you think the Pelicans actually wanted to move Anthony Davis, or was it just a ploy? And do you think it was awkward how Davis's agent was the one who came out and asked for a trade?
I don't think it was awkward at all that Rich Paul was the one who did it. I mean, when Anthony Davis hired Rich Paul, most of us recognized that wasn't going to be so he could negotiate a contract that didn't need negotiating. I mean, the guy's eligible for a Supermax. You're either going to take it or not. And the minute Rich Paul was hired, that kind of gave us a signal that our, the fears were confirmed, that Anthony Davis was not going to sign up for that Supermax and would not want to be in New Orleans long term. It just happened sooner, I think, than a lot of us thought it would. I don't think the Pelicans had any intention of ever moving Anthony Davis at the trade deadline, and they did exactly what I thought they'd do. They sat on that thing and allowed all the speculation to run rampant. I thought it was very unfair that Alvin Gentry was kind of left to deal with it every day too. Normally you'd like for somebody in the front office to address it, and handle it and take the coach out of that spotlight if he didn't have to be there. You guys probably saw some of the back and forth Gentry was having on a daily basis with the media covering that team. It got a little, testy at times. I mean, people asked me a million times in the lead up. I never once thought the Pelicans were going to make a deal. Certainly not to the Lakers, but to anybody else. You don't trade Anthony Davis under the pressure of a 10-day, window where he comes out with a trade request and then you react as the Pelicans by doing exactly what he asked for. That would have been crazy.
Well, Sekou, keeping that in mind that he really evidently doesn't want to stay in New Orleans, where do you think would be the best fit for him?
Well, I mean, as a player, he's good enough to go anywhere. I mean, he could literally go to any team in the league and be effective and do what he's always done. So it's really about his preference. Wherever you move him outside of the teams that he lets you know that he wants to go to, you're just basically he's getting rented out. If it's not one of his preferred destinations, a team that he tells you, I'm willing to sign a long-term deal with this if you move me there, it's potentially strictly a rental. But I think, if you're talking about fit in terms of where would he best maximize his next few years, he's been pretty obvious in his desire to play with LeBron and to play in LA. The Lakers, of course, that would be a great fit because anybody that's played with LeBron the last 8 years can tell you that it usually ends up in a pretty advantageous position in terms of chasing the championship. I think this idea that he would go somewhere and start fresh works for Anthony Davis in words that it hasn't for some of these other guys who have requested trade, in recent years, because he's not leaving a playoff situation. Even Paul George, though he didn't leave Indiana at a time when they were going to back-to-back Eastern Conference Finals, he'd been there. Kyrie had been to the finals, had won a championship. Kawhi Leonard had been to a finals, won a championship, had been a finals MVP. Kevin Durant, had been to the finals in Oklahoma City and certainly was among the top players in the game when he decided he didn't want to be in Oklahoma City and went to Golden State in free agency. You go back and look at all the superstar players who have exited situations here in recent years, they were leaving with a much more accomplished body of work in terms of team success than what Anthony Davis is.
Speaking of the Pelicans, Lakers, and craziness of this trade went down, and the Pelicans came back and made an offer. I don't know if that was because they had revenge for the tampering in mind. Was it because the Pelicans didn't want to make a deal, or was it they want the Celtics in the bidding war for AD down the stretch?
I'm sure they want everybody in the bidding war. They want the assets available in a potential trade for Anthony Davis to be as great as possible. So that means you want everybody willing to spend, and that's going to happen, guys, much more readily in July than it will at the trade deadline. There's just so much more flexibility for the teams. You're talking about being out of the season as opposed to in the midst of a season. So, some teams are going to have their priorities focused elsewhere. And nobody knew that this was going to go public. Even if Anthony Davis and his representatives had said, we don't want to be here, we're not going to sign the Supermax, but we're going to let you know that as an organization and let you work to figure out a situation without it being public. That still wouldn't have made it any more likely that he got moved at the trade deadline. There are just too many options available to you if you're the Pelicans at the trade deadline compared to the limitations, in free agency in the summer compared to the limitations that will be on teams at the trade deadline. And that's why you didn't see Anthony Davis get moved. Anybody who's been around this league for any amount of time that tells you they thought a deal was going to happen is kidding themselves. Deals like that don't get telegraphed. Those are things that are not going to happen with everybody watching and the two teams lining up when a guy has that much time left on that deal's not happening.
So on the other side of this whole thing, the Lakers, simply put, Sekou, where do they go from here?
They have tons of options still available to them. They held on to their young assets, other than Zubac. Salary-wise, it's not like you were giving up anybody who was making a considerable amount of money. As good as he looked in limited exposure for the Lakers, I don't know that he was some long-term keeper, and neither did the Lakers. You've got everything that you had before Anthony Davis, piped up about wanting to be traded. All of those opportunities that the Lakers have in, this summer to chase one and potentially two big-name free agents are still there. The Lakers, they deal with the perceived sting of not getting Anthony Davis, but I'm pretty certain Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka are smart enough to know that there was nothing but a long shot that would even take place. I don't think the Lakers internally should be panicking at all. They do have some repairing to do of egos, maybe of their young guys, some of their players who were not, experienced in the trade deadline speculation that comes around the league. For most guys, they were immune to it because they were in a rebuilding mode last year where it wouldn't have been even a part of their, scene. And now you get LeBron, those veterans in there on those one-year deals, then that changes the game for those young guys. So now they've become expendable, in the public sphere if it means getting a superstar player. So that's where if you're the Lakers, that's where you're going to go now to kind of patch up some relationships and make sure guys understand that is a part of the business and anything is possible going forward. So you finish this season strong and then go into the summer knowing that the locker room most likely will not look anything like it did this season if the Lakers get done the business they want to in the summer.
So, Sekou, seeing as how we are a New York-based podcast, I have to bring it back to local a bit. Breaking down the Porzingis deal, did anybody win this or did we all lose?
Well, listen, I'm not going to tell you this is the normal sky is falling summer for the Knicks. There's way too much cap space available right now in New York. And you got both teams in New York, both teams in LA getting ready for a huge summer. In addition to other teams, there are a wealth of stars available in free agency. It's going to come down to how strong is the recruiting pitch that the Knicks can put on, and is there a guy or two ready to tackle the responsibility of being the face or faces of that franchise? And I know it's been tough in the past. People can't figure out why New York, of all places, is struggling to find some anchor superstars. They want to be there and want to be a part of that culture. I think we all know, if you guys are New York-based, we don't have to go through all of the different, people and instances that bear the responsibility for, or that at least people believe bear the responsibility for that. But if you're Steve Mills and Scott Perry and you've done the work that they've done to clear the cap space, you obviously have a plan together. You have a plan in place. You have players in mind that you're going to pursue, and we'll see what happens, at midnight, July 1, to see who they are, reaching out to and putting a full-court press on, come and be the new faces of the New York Knicks.
Talking to Sekou Smith of NBA TV, writes for NBA.com, and one of the hosts of the Hangtime podcast. Keeping it with the Knicks, they have pinned everything on the hope that KD or Kyrie will come to New York this summer. In your best estimation, is there any chance these moves can happen? And how can you convince the Knicks fans after seeing the KP drama, after failing to land LeBron or Bosh in that big free agency clash in 2010, and after all the drama in Knicks land, how can you convince them this trade was good for them and whether any other possible move could happen for this organization considering their circumstances?
I don't know if you can until you get somebody in place. I don't know if you can convince fans who have been burned like that in the past. You bring up some very obvious instances, the summer when they thought there was a chance to get LeBron. For whatever reason, not being New York based, I'm always kind of amazed at this idea that everybody thinks whoever the big name free agent is coming to their town. It always surprises me how strong that momentum seems to be in terms of public sentiment when there's no indication that it's going to happen. Like I never felt like New York was a leader to get LeBron or that, Bosh and these other guys are headed to New York, because there hasn't been an instance there for them to really look at as an example of somebody else who went there and did it and flourished. So it's going to take an actual body walking through that door and signing on the dotted line, I would think, to convince the fans that moving Kristaps Porzingis out and having Kevin Knox and whoever these other young pieces you're going to have still in place, as young guys to surround, some veteran stars to take that mantle. I don't even know where this notion that Kevin Durant and Kyrie are even, seriously considering it. I mean, Kyrie's in a situation where he could stay in Boston and be just fine and contend for the foreseeable future. Durant clearly could exercise his best options by staying where he is and continuing to play for and potentially win championships with the Warriors. So all of it's a risk. All of it is a high risk, very high reward proposition, for the Knicks and their fans. But I would argue that there needs to be a dose of realism, injected into the situation for Knicks fans. You can't just shoot for the stars and then be disappointed when the reality should tell you you're not going to get the high end of what you're looking for. That's very rare. I mean, a lot of teams going into free agency with money to spend every summer, and there are only X number of true superstars to go around. What you have to wrap your head around if you're a Knicks fan is that is a combination of DeMarcus Cousins and Jimmy Butler or somebody, some kind of pairing like that. Will that satisfy your Jones for a superstar in New York? And if not, then yeah, you better be prepared to be disappointed, because the odds are that the incumbent teams for several of these big name guys will have a better chance at keeping them than you will of prying them away.
All right, Sekou, let's go back to LA a little bit, more specifically about not so much a player on LA, but his father. So how are we supposed to react to LeVar Ball being Lonzo's agent and demanding if Lonzo got traded, he needed to go to Phoenix? How he said Lonzo was a better player than LeBron on Undisputed, how Sims would take all his sons, and how the Lakers will never win a championship if they trade Lonzo. And I guess a second part to this question, why do major networks need to keep giving him a microphone? I know that it's content for the networks, which is great, but when you have the Lakers who don't want him in the public eye and people don't want him speaking for his son, why does this keep happening?
I don't know. I mean, I guess that's just the age we live in. I don't tune in for anything that he does or watch, when he's running his gibbers about whatever. I mean, because I don't think it's fair to Lonzo Ball, to hold him responsible for the words that come out of his dad's mouth. That'd be the equivalent of somebody, talking about dad and then me having to answer for what he said. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. The problem is you can't control him. Like, who's going to tell him to stop talking? And like you said, as long as networks keep putting the microphone in his face and asking him for his reactions or opinions about things, he's going to deliver them. I mean, he's made that clear that he's not going to hold his tongue for anybody, not Magic Johnson, Jeannie Buss, or anybody within the Lakers organization, certainly not for his son's sake. So it's up to the public to decide how much of his foolishness they want to listen to. I mean, he lost me a long time ago when he was proclaiming that, all three of his boys were going to play for the Lakers and he could beat Michael Jordan in one-on-one. I mean, I wrapped up the whole LeVar Ball train a long time ago. I'm honestly surprised he's back talking the way he was in the lead up to the trade deadline. That's the last thing, Lonzo Ball needed was LeVar Ball carrying on the way he did, in the lead up to the trade deadline. You don't need that added distraction if you're Lonzo Ball trying to come back from that injury and get back into a groove with a Lakers team that is going to contend and probably get a playoff spot this year and need Lonzo Ball to be focused and playing his best basketball come mid-April. I'm not telling anybody who and what to listen to. I'm just pointing out that you'd be kind of foolish to take stock in anything that LeVar Ball says about what's going on with the Lakers because he has no control over it.
Sekou, if we may keep the controversy theme, but I have to ask, what's your feelings on the LeBron James Instagram post that was concerning Harrison Barnes and the backlash to all of it?
Well, I mean, I absolutely understand where the players are coming from in this regard, and this is something that I think you'll find a divide on, amongst people who are covering the league or observing it. Why is it okay for a team to put players on the trading block without any repercussions, without any regard for, how they do it in the manner in which it's done? And then players are vilified anytime they ask for a trade or request a trade. And it's just a strange parochial thing I believe that we've adopted as the viewing public and even as the media, in that we tend to want a team to have a certain amount of leeway in terms of honoring a contract, but then a worker or a player has to uphold a different standard. And so I get where LeBron and the players are coming from, where they don't like to be vilified when they ask for a trade, because nobody vilifies a team for exploring trade opportunities with guys who are under contract. It's, but to me, that's more in the backlash on social media. LeBron could say he loves peanut butter and jelly on a Tuesday night, on a rainy Tuesday night, and it would cause a firestorm on Instagram. It doesn't matter what LeBron says. It's going to be something that starts, a media storm whenever he speaks up about something. But I think his larger point about the narrative that it's okay for one side to want to break a contract or to want to change the parameters in terms of whatever was agreed upon with a player, and then not okay for a player to want to take the power in his own hands to do the exact same thing. And I agree that, there is a double standard, that we tend to look down on it when the players do it and basically ignore it when teams do it, that they don't want to be vilified for doing the same thing teams do all the time.
Now, looking at the NBA trade deadline, we saw two teams in the East really do well with their trades. We saw the Raptors, who made their trade for Gasol, but it was the Sixers who really came out on top by getting Tobias Harris. Did they put themselves in a good place? And was also moving Fultz a relief, or was it more for team chemistry or trade value?
No, I think moving Fultz, to answer your second question first, was clearly about relief. You wanted to get away from the drama that has been this Markelle Fultz saga. The other part about it that made sense for doing it now is that Elton Brand wasn't in charge of the Sixers in their drafting when you took Markelle Fultz, who was a questionable number one pick for a lot of people. He was not viewed around the league as some slam dunk pick who was going to be a surefire, star as the top guy in that draft. I don't know that you needed to get him off your roster to improve team chemistry. It was never his team, never going to be his team as long as Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons are there. So, if you're Philly, you made a major upgrade in adding Tobias Harris, Boban Marjanovic, Mike Scott. Those are assets that are going to improve your position in the Eastern Conference right now. They're giving you an immediate return on that risk that certainly Markelle Fultz was not going to give you this year, and a potential for some long-term synergies, salary-wise and nucleus-wise, if Tobias Harris is a part of your long-term plans. He's an excellent, third. I mean, you're talking about an unbelievable third or fourth option on a quality playoff type team for the next few years. I think you did yourself a service if you're the Sixers by acquiring him.
Now, Sekou, do you feel Kevin Durant is overreacting to the attention he's receiving from the media regarding his upcoming free agency?
I mean, I don't know that he's overreacting. I think he's maybe, I don't know that he's comprehending the relationship that a player of his magnitude has with the media, whether they like it or not. I think maybe that's where the wires have gotten crossed or maybe have not connected. But I don't know that he's overreacting. He's been rather sensitive, to certain things since he joined the Warriors. And even before that I don't think point to something of a change in his behavior or his demeanor. I mean, he's been a prickly individual, to say the least, and at the finish of his time in Oklahoma City, and certainly since he's joined the Warriors. And that's his right, guys. I have no problem with a player expressing himself, positively or negatively in terms of dealing with us. I only ask that they understand that they will have to deal with us one way or another. And it's really up to them how that relationship, goes. It's up to them to decide what they want to be a party to and how they want to conduct themselves. And then it's also on us as the basketball, the NBA media, to make sure we do our diligence to handle situations properly and conduct ourselves in the right way. So I don't have an issue with it. He's fine to, express himself in whatever way he wants. And we're both sides are fine to disagree on how it should be handled.
Final question, Sekou. With the trade deadline now passed, and we've seen a lot of good moves. We saw Toronto make moves. We saw the Sixers make moves. We saw Milwaukee make some decent moves. Are there any teams, in your opinion, that you might have been disappointed with that could have made moves that would have made them better teams down the stretch?
I would have liked to have seen Portland do something, and I was rather surprised that they didn't make a deal to really improve themselves. I think back to the way they were swept last year by New Orleans, and I thought that would have lit a fire under the Trailblazers to do something different. But I also understand that with the passing of Paul Allen and them not having their owner around, to really be there as kind of the last line of, authority in terms of when you want to make some kind of seismic deal, you got to have a buy-in from your owner. That's where you go to get that buy-in. So I understand maybe why there was some hesitancy on their part not to do it. But that's the one team that I'm looking at and saying they have an opportunity right now in the Western Conference to either keep pace with the other power teams or potentially fall behind if they're not careful. And I think it would be dangerous at this stage of Dame Lillard's career, CJ McCollum's career, for the Trailblazers not to figure out a way to add the right kind of piece to help those two guys maximize their situation. If you don't, you'll look up and that window of opportunity will have vanished. There'll be somebody like Denver or Utah that takes your place because you didn't make a move or do something to improve your standing.
That was Sekou Smith of NBA TV. He also writes for NBA.com. You can also catch him on the Hang Time podcast. Sekou, thanks for joining us on the Unspoken podcast.
Sure, guys. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.